Well, the fallout over those allegations against Indian officials continues after the federal government and the RCMP came out on Monday alleging that Indian diplomats are engaged in serious criminal activity in Canada, including, as Judy just mentioned, homicides and extortions. Now, Canada has been seeking support from its Five Eyes allies, which are the United States, United Kingdom, Australia, and New Zealand. But reaction has been fairly tepid. There's a new statement from the UK's Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office. It says, in part, we are in contact with our Canadian partners about the serious developments outlined in the independent investigations in Canada. It goes on to say the UK has the full confidence in Canada's judicial system. Respect for sovereignty and the rule of law is essential. The government of India's cooperation with Canada's legal process is the right next step, end quote. Now, Australia's Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade has also released a statement saying Australia has made clear our concerns about the allegations under investigation in Canada and our respect for Canada's judicial process. Our position of principle is that the sovereignty of all countries should be respected and that the rule of law should also be respected. With more on this now, I'm joined by Canada's ambassador to the U.S., Kirsten Hillman. Thank you so much for joining us, Ambassador.
Thanks for having me.
I'd like to pick up on those responses from our allies on India. We did hear from a U.S. State Department spokesperson yesterday who said they'd like India to cooperate with Canada's investigation. Do you think the U.S. response could have been stronger on this?
Well, I think their response has been strong. They also expressed deep concern with the information that has come out recently. And, this isn't the first interaction we have had with the U.S. on this matter. They're responding to what came out on Monday. But as you know well, the U.S. is facing a similar situation here in the United States with an attempted murder of an American citizen on American soil. And so over the course of the last number of months, they have stood with us and urged India in private and in public to cooperate and expressed alarm and concern around the information that we have and that we have shared with our Five Eyes colleagues.
To the point that you just made there, yes, they have a similar situation that they're dealing with, but it seems like they're getting a different response from India, where India has this quasi-working group that's actually going to D.C. to help discuss it. So why does it seem like they're getting more progress than Canada might be on this?
Well, I think that, we have been working very hard and have had a number of discussions with the Indian government over the last several months. You're quite right. The working group that the United States has, we have not participated in. I think that it would make sense that we do. But it's not to say that we haven't been trying to discuss with the Indians, but it hasn't been as successful. You're quite right. But I think what's important to say here is that we're all among our allied countries trying to work together and support each other. And in that regard, hopefully building some momentum towards resolving this issue according to the rule of law, and also, making it clear that it is important to us to maintain a strong relationship with the Indian people, with India, and try and find a way forward that allows us to do both.
Do you see any room for daylight there for Canada to be included in that working group that you were talking about?
Well, I think either included having one of our own working with India, that this is something that we would really like to do. It's unfortunately the decision is not exclusively up to us, and there have been a lot of overtures and efforts, but we're not going to stop trying to work on this constructively with the Indians. But in the meantime, as you set out in sort of the intro to this segment, we are working with our Five Eyes allies to find ways to make it abundantly clear that none of us are going to tolerate this kind of behavior by a foreign government in our territory.
All right, I wanted to turn to the U.S. election. We're just 19 days away from a new president in the United States. For the last number of months, you and members of the government have been reaching out to senators, House representatives, and governors, among others. We've seen you in Philadelphia, at a number of other different places. Do you feel like that effort in the outreach to U.S. officials to sort of educate them on the importance of this relationship, do you think that effort has been effective? Because we know in the last time, Canada kind of got caught a little flat-footed, and we also understand that this has been more of a proactive movement. So how would you rate the success of that effort?
Well, I do think it's successful. I think that for me, one of the ways in which you judge whether or not a campaign of information is resonating is if the people that you're trying to reach are repeating your messages, either back to you or to others. And we have seen that on a number of occasions. And I also think that it's really important. The efforts that we've been making are to get out of sort of Washington, New York, Los Angeles, and into smaller communities and other states that are deeply dependent on trade and economic relationship with Canada. 2/3 of U.S. states count us as their #1 customer. And so our ability to get that message out has been very successful. And, I'll be honest with you, it's not always information that is front of mind for the state of Nevada or the state of North Dakota or even the state of Florida, where the deep contribution that Canada is making to their economy. So these have been very worthwhile trips. We have had a lot of follow-up from those trips with further meetings, further encounters, further business arrangements being constructed. So yeah, I think it's been very successful. But you know what? This is a big country with a lot going on, and we have to keep up the pace. You can't really sort of rest on your laurels on these kinds of things. So we're going to continue.
And both presidential candidates, former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris, have both promised to review the Canada-U.S. Mexico agreement. How are you preparing for both scenarios, no matter who gets into the White House?
Yeah, so we too have committed to do a review. It's a clause in the agreement. So Canada, U.S., and Mexico have agreed to a clause that has us review the agreement after 6 years and to discuss whether or not we feel that it remains fit for purpose, whether it's doing what we expected it to do, whether we want to find ways to add to it, to modify it, and just do an assessment. Canada started that assessment. We've started a public consultation on it, and so we're working towards being ready for that conversation. So I think that that's the first thing that we're doing to prepare, and obviously we're starting to talk to our American and Mexican colleagues about, as we do all the time, about how the arrangement is working within their country, but maybe a little bit more intensely now. But I guess one thing that I would like to put on the table, and I think it's really important for Canadians to understand, is the agreement itself is working well and doing exactly what it was intended to do. The level of trade between Canada, the United States, and Mexico is at historic levels, higher than it's been in the history of our three countries. So that is in part, not exclusively, but it's in part due to the stable, predictable framework that we have set out in the USMCA, as they call it down here, or the CUSMA, as we call it in Canada. And that is recognized across this country. There's not an interlocutor that I meet that doesn't value that fact, but it doesn't mean that they don't think that it's worth just having a look at it to make sure it, as I say, remains fit for purpose.
I take your point on that, and maybe, for Canadian eyes, that it may be working well, but understanding the politics in the United States and how there's been a lot of discussion around it, either former President Trump or Vice President Harris, who have basically said, Trump has said that he doesn't want to undermine it, but certainly has been coming over the top with tariffs, and that there may be some nervousness on this side of the border. So how do you sort of look at this and say, you know what, it looks good, we want to kind of keep it the same, maybe some tweaks, when everybody, I think, looks south of the border and says, I don't think that they want tweaks. They may want wholesale changes.
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, I think that, we're in the middle of an election campaign down here. So I think that we have to take that into account when we interpret the things that the candidates are saying. I think that the Vice President Harris has identified some areas that she thinks would be important to look at. that are based on her platform and her perspective around trade, as has former President Trump. I think that the tariffs issue is almost sort of a separate issue. So there's the review of the CUSMA, the new NAFTA, that will take place under the terms of that agreement. Under that agreement, Canada, the U.S., and Mexico are 99% tariff-free. Tariffs are at zero, 99% of the trade that we do with the United States of America. That's the deal. That's the deal that governs between our two countries, or three countries. And if former President Trump is reelected and he returns to the White House and he wants to change the terms of that arrangement, that's a discussion. That's a negotiation that changes the terms of an agreement that we already have. So that will require us to continue, to be quite frank, a lot of the advocacy that we have been doing amongst his supporters, his team, his advisors, to show them, in real and concrete terms, how a tariff like that would affect the regions that we've been visiting, the Nebraskas, the West Virginias, the Arizonas of the world, the Texas, the Florida. What is that going to mean to the prosperity and jobs that trade with Canada creates in those regions? So that is a related but somewhat differentiated conversation than the one around this cyclical review of the new NAFTA, the CUSMA, that is built into that agreement.
So just last in closing here, do you think it'll be easier if it's a Harris presidency?
I think that it will be probably a little bit different in the way that review would be undertaken. I think that, they're a little bit more transparent on and systematic on the kinds of things that they might want to look at. I think, on the other hand, President Trump, if he is reelected, it has certain pride in the agreement that was negotiated. And so while he might want to see changes, at least the people I'm talking to, I think, he recognizes it's an important achievement for him in his last tenure at the White House. But then there is the tariff issue, the 10% tariffs across the board, which I think the Trump administration, or the potential Trump administration, sees as a separate issue to review of the new NAFTA. And that's something we really do have to talk to them about, because it isn't. It's all about our trading relationship and the terms under which we are trading. And we will want to be talking about we'll be wanting to talk to him about his tariff proposal in a way that relates to that relationship and the importance, as I say, of stability and predictability in achieving the success that we've been able to achieve.
All right, Ambassador, we're going to have to leave it there. Canada's ambassador to the United States, Kirsten Hillman, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.